But the way that I tell people what I do is I just say that I work at the intersection of money and emotions, and I help people to have conversations about their feelings about money.
Teach me something, Uncle Money.
Welcome, everybody. This is another episode of Practice Prosperity. We have a special guest today. We have a financial therapist, which we've had on before, but she takes a new spin on it. She actually does family governance consulting. We talk a lot about family businesses passing on down to the next generation, but we have an expert here to discuss this. So welcome on the show, Dr. Shay.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
If you don't mind, can you explain a little bit about yourself, your firm, and the populations that you serve?
Yes, so I am Dr. Shay Harris-Pierre, licensed professional counselor, certified financial therapist, and family governance and family dynamics expert. So my background is in marriage and family therapy. And so I've got a decent number of years of experience in working with families and couples. In my private practice, I see as a financial therapist, I see high achieving women of color and their relationships. So the couples that they're in, the families that they're in, and in doing that work, I noticed, there's a lot of financial issues or a lot of emotional ties to money that my clients were coming in with. And so I did a lot of research on my end to get some information about how to help my clients better. And that's how I found the financial therapy world. And I haven't looked back. And it's been really wonderful to serve my clients in that way and to help them at the intersection of emotions and money, to help them to understand how emotional money and money behaviors can be. And then on the other side, on the consulting side, I work with financial professionals, financial planners, advisors, accountants, estate attorneys, et cetera. Anybody who works with a family who is in business. And I help them to help their clients in a better way by understanding how emotional money can be and how important individuals' relationships to money and the emotional aspect of those relationships to money can be. And then I also provide family governance services for families in business. And pretty much, I think we'll get into what that is and we'll have a conversation about that a little later. So
What drove you to this passion of money management? There's a quantitative element, there's the emotional side that you heavily deal with. What keeps you in this space?
the passion comes from seeing, again, kind of my background with my clients that I started to notice having these issues around um, like cross-class growth or experiencing differences with like growing up maybe a lower income and then making more money as an adult or things like that, and how some of the older things that they used to do or like the behaviors they used to have around money are showing up even when they are in a different socioeconomic status. And so that really stood out to me because it's in essence a trauma response a lot of times, where the behaviors that we have around our money are learned behaviors from our families of origin, but they also can be heavily connected to our reactions to traumatic experiences. And with money being so important and such a large vehicle through which we can find a bit of satisfaction and gratification, a lot of people's money behaviors might be tied to a sense of safety and connection or a sense of stability, and that can show up in their financial behaviors. And it's interesting to me.
So it sounds like you took a path of almost super serving the client base you were already working with. You noticed this issue and it's like, how can I become more equipped to handle these scenarios that my clients are now facing? So I definitely like that. I love a good origin story. So, what was your journey to become a therapist? Because it's not an easy path. You can't just get one degree. You have to get your master's. Like, explain that journey from me deciding, are you deciding to become a therapist to you now practicing?
Yes. So, okay. Um, as a child, I lost my dad.
Mm.
And I had an experience with a grief counselor. I was like 6, And so I don't remember very much, but all I do remember of that experience was that there was a person who came and helped me when when the worst thing that happened in my life happened at that point. And I wanted to be that. At 6 years old, I don't think I actually cognizantly, made that decision. But the impact that that person had on me left me with this desire to serve others, um, and to do so in a way that leaves a lasting impact, even if the work that I'm doing, the actual work that I'm doing has finished. And so that was a seed that was kind of planted throughout the course of my life. Growing up, I've always been, really interested in relationships and behaviors and how people or why people behave the way that they do. So I got my undergrad in psychology. My bachelor's is in psychology from Hampton University. And at the end or toward the end of that degree, because of course I knew I was, you can't do much with a bachelor's in psychology. So I knew I had to get a little bit more education. And also, as an aside, before my dad passed, he instilled in me the importance of education. And he would say that, education is something that no one can take away from you. And so that was something that I knew I was going to get as many degrees as I could, or like at least a terminal degree. So that was always in the back of my mind. But toward the end of my bachelor's degree, I started to wonder because I knew I wanted to help people as a psychotherapist. I started to wonder and looking at grad schools, I was like, well, what is the best way, or like, how can I do this in the best way? And then I asked myself, well, how do people get messed up? And the first thing that came to mind was their families of origin. And so I wanted to do some more learning around that, more learning around how families interact, more learning around how like family systems impact the people that are involved in families. And so I got my master's degree in marriage and family therapy. Did a lot of researching and learning about how families can be served, and how families operate really. And then toward the end of that degree, I was like, okay, well, what do I want to do? How can I help more people? And I decided to go the route of becoming a counselor educator and supervisor to help other clinicians to do the work that I had learned to do. And so I got my Ph.D. in counselor education and supervision, and worked as a professor for about 7-ish years. Teaching clinicians how to do the work, and specifically teaching like the practical classes. So like how to have a conversation with a client, as well as the marriage and family classes. So I've been spending a bit of time teaching how to do these things and doing the work myself. And then, after that, going into kind of the story that I shared already with like my private practice and the clients that I shared, that's how I ended up in financial therapy. And so at this moment, I'm merging or leveraging all of my skills and kind of all of the things that I've learned to um, to serve families and business, to help people to understand that the relationships that exist in a family and the relationships that exist in a business can be contradictory sometimes. There are some really nuanced and special experiences that people have in family businesses, and it can be really detrimental not only to the family but also to the family business, like on the bottom line of it, if there are relational issues, relational conflicts that exist in a family business. So that's why I'm there.
During your studies of how families work together, whether it's undergrad or grad school or even doctoral program, what
Mhm.
is the one of the aha moments you learned about family dynamics that you leverage today in your practice? What is unique about families?
That they are one of the first classes I took, um, and I can be a bit verbose, so rein me in if you need to. But one of the first classes that I took led to that aha moment. And one of the concepts that we talked about was just kind of basic family systems theory.
Mhm.
And that is, to water it down and summarize it very concisely, the idea that in a family, everyone in that family influences and is influenced by the other people within that family. And also that families operate like systems, like a car or like a bicycle or something like that, where there's different parts of the system. There's a different, you got the steering wheel, you got the wheels, you got the windshield, and every part has its role, but they operate together in order to achieve a goal. And once you find out what that goal is and how that goal is being achieved, sometimes it can be a great way that the parts are working together to achieve the goal, but sometimes there can be some issues in how that goal is being achieved and it doesn't work for everybody. And so it's really kind of eye-opening or an aha moment to see families, to see people and groups and the way that groups interact from the lens of like they're a system and they're trying to achieve a goal, but not always does that the way that they go about achieving that goal match with the goal being achieved.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. When you were in your master's program, did the concept of how much you would make ever went into your mind? Is like, what is my earnings potential because I've chosen this profession?
Yes. Especially as someone who took student loans out. There was, a time that, I remember thinking, how am I going to pay this stuff back? And it's interesting because in the mental health profession, there's the idea that like if you go into this profession, you don't do it for the money. I couldn't tell you how many times I heard that. And I think that that's pretty a dangerous concept to teach to students or to share with students, because the work that we do is very valuable. The skills that we have as mental health professionals, and maybe I'll just speak for myself, the skills that I have as a mental health professional with the years of education, the years of experience, and everything that I do is very unique and it's also very valuable, and I should be paid for what I am providing, the services that I have worked very hard to hone the skills for, and the services that I provide on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, it came to mind, and I've in the years I've grown out of the kind of I wouldn't say scarcity mindset, but like the lacking mindset or the lack of growth mindset associated with being a mental health professional.
Yeah. What I see a lot is that you get into fix that I'm not supposed to make so much. I'm not
Right.
supposed to be profit seeking.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've seen a lot of therapists kind of break out of that. You decided to teach. How would you describe yourself as a teacher? Were you more, case based? Were you fun? Were you energetic? What was your teaching experience?
You might have to ask my students about that. I don't know if I'm fun. No, I think I am kind of fun. I like to integrate creativity and real life case scenarios into the work that I do as a teacher,
Mhm.
because especially in a master's program, as a master's student, you're learning how to master a skill or master a craft. And so it's the application, the practical application that's important. And so throughout my classes that I taught, I would make sure to bring in a lot of, case studies, a lot of my own experiences, um, a lot of, you know, there was one class I kind of revamped and did Disney movies throughout the course of the semester. Every week we would watch a different Disney movie and they would write a paper about it. I think that's one of the funner things, one of the funner classes that I taught. Um, so yeah, I think that's how I approach education, is that it should be hands-on. It should be something that's applicable, and you can learn a whole lot by kind of piecing apart or dissecting or understanding a case or an example.
I've done a lot of study into the hero's journey. Because you had the class, speak to how Disney tries to reflect reality within their movies. I don't think a lot is said of the time they spend with the character development and the storyline.
Yeah, and that makes sense. A lot of the hero's journey with your origin story question, kind of where that came from. But with Disney movies, the reason that I chose those is because, well, I'm a big Disney person,
Mhm.
but also because the family dynamics that were shown and the relationships that are shown in Disney movies are so nuanced and complex and can be seen from a very they can be seen from a therapeutic perspective. And a lot of times my students will watch the movie, with this different lens of what we're learning in class. And they say, oh my gosh, like the writers at Disney really know what they're talking about, because they kind of go through the process of what the problem can be in a family system or in a relationship, and how it can cause a bit of turmoil, and there can be, that struggle. And then on the other side, there can be a sense of resolution, and problems can be solved, whatever way that looks like for the family.
Okay. So you worked in a university system, which is a major institution. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of your clients work for large institutions, maybe not a school system, maybe corporate. Speak on the challenges your client base faces working in these large institutions, whether that's trying to climb the corporate ladder, whether it's dealing with relationship dynamics with coworkers. What is it like for your client base in today's environment?
Difficult to say the least. A lot of my clients experience workplace trauma and race-based trauma in the workplace, specifically around being maybe the only person of color, the only woman of color, and what their experience looks like as far as microaggressions that exist at the intersection of being a woman and a person of color. And being the only one, or maybe not being the only one, but still feeling like the only one. So loneliness, isolation, the race-based trauma of experiencing microaggressions in the workplace, being looked over for promotions, or not being paid what they're worth. Those are a lot of the things that I notice in the work that I do with my high achieving women clients.
So let's say you're speaking to a young person about to receive their degree in whatever profession. How would you advise them about navigating? Would you advise them to navigate through these large institutions? Like, what could bring peace as far as a career path? Or
Um, Having a sense of groundedness and community is going to be very important as you navigate some of these structures and institutions, because the institution itself is more than likely not created to with you as the new graduate in mind. Um, and it may be created with your work and burnout in mind. So keeping a sense of being grounded, engaging in intentional self-care, and engaging with your community can be really helpful in navigating that. In my work as a counselor educator, in the academy, I wouldn't have made it. I wouldn't have lasted the 7 years to tenure and all of that without the other Black women who were in the academy as well, as friends and mentors and guides. Like having that level of community, being able to call someone up after a wild faculty meeting and say, girl, listen to what just happened. Like that kind of stuff is really invaluable and can be really helpful.
I like that a lot. I like to double down on that question. If you were to advise somebody going into their career, what are the chess pieces that they need to have that professional community or professional coping community? Like, what are these elements? Is it a mentor? Is it somebody on your level? Like, what are those individuals that you would like to have in place?
I think that mentorship, like people say mentor as in like singular, but mentorship, like you should have a mentor for every area of your life. Um, and also, mentors don't always necessarily need to be someone who's further along than you. You can have a peer mentor as well. So there can be a mentor who is, um, doing the work that you want to do, and so they can help you along that path. There can be a mentor who is in a position that maybe like a peer mentor who can help support, like you can help support one another. You can also have like a personal mentor. You can have a mentor for, you know, just like being like a mentor that aligns with your identities. And I guess I'm kind of talking around it, but like to use myself as an example, I had multiple mentors throughout the course of my, well, still do have multiple mentors throughout my career. And um they look different and they exist and they mentor me in different ways. A lot of times when we think about mentorship, we, especially as women of color, we may think that I need to find another woman of color who's doing exactly what I can or what I want to do so that she can mentor me through that process. But what kind of sucks is that sometimes there isn't someone doing, and sometimes as women of color, we are not, like, we're the trailblazers, we're the pioneers. And so I've had mentors who are doing, like, are further along in their career, who are Black women, but then and who can, identify and can, relate to some of the experiences. And that's really helpful. Then there's also the mentors that I've had who, uh, who are maybe men or who are, oh, I've got a mentor who is a white man who is an excellent mentor and has, shown me so many things that have been really helpful in my growth, throughout my career. And so it's not about having a mentor. It's important to have a mentor maybe that looks like you and can give you some insights into what your experience is, given your racial identity or your gender identity or any of your identities. But also don't limit yourself to mentors that only look like you, because there are other areas of your life that a mentor might not look like you.
I like to think that those things are like blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
You have a professional blind spot. If you only talk to people within your profession, you may
Mm-hmm.
miss something. You could have a racial blind spot. If you only talk to people within your race, you may miss something.
Mm-hmm.
Speak on that diversity element. We want diversity. We want people who come from different things, but you should also seek diversity. Speak on creating that diverse network and what are the benefits of that.
Yeah, be intentional. Um, find people who are doing the things that you want to do and connect with them, because again, that diversity of thought is going to give you different layers of insight that can help you to build your career in the way that you want it. If you have a mentor that is doing something that maybe you thought you wanted to do, but the further you get along in your own journey, that mentor is like, yeah, you just got to keep doing this, this, and this. And you're like, well, that doesn't really align with me. Having other mentors that can give you some different insight or different options, different choices can really be helpful to kind of craft your own path. And it widens your perspective. And that's really important.
In the financial world, we say all the time, if you do these things, you can become financially successful. But if somebody who doesn't come from money, what are the challenges of them following the usually prescribed plan that us as financial planners give? What are some of the assumptions that we're missing that those who don't come from money may be dealing with when it comes to gaining wealth for themselves?
Well, I'd say that it's kind of twofold, right? People who don't come from money are inherently marginalized in that way, like in the socioeconomic way, right? And so we can talk about like the institutions that exist, the systems, the structures that are in place that kind of facilitate and perpetuate poverty, like the predatory lending, et cetera. That's its own thing. And then there's also a piece on the other side of like coming from an emotional place, like the behavioral place. There are a lot of things that can come up when someone doesn't have um, they don't have that scaffolding or the foundation and the foundational knowledge around how to navigate finances. But then there's the feelings that come with that as well, of shame, guilt, I don't know enough about money. So I'm ashamed of myself because I should know because everybody knows
Mhm.
about money. Um, but I don't. And so I just got to, kind of try and figure it out myself. Or the feelings of, envy or sadness or even like scarcity or um lots and lots and lots of feelings. Lack of self-worth is also another big piece of the financial conversation that shows up in financial behaviors as well.
Makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned early on that you deal primarily with successful Black women, and sometimes that divvies into their relationship. And what we're seeing in this culture in general is that women are making more money and sometimes find themselves as the breadwinner inside of a household. How do you advise women dealing with this new dynamic? We have, similar to poverty, we have cultural expectations, certain things that keep you in a certain area, and then we have internal expectations. Like, how do you balance being the new breadwinner as a successful Black woman?
I think I might want to ask you for a little bit of a little bit more with that.
Yeah,
More
yeah.
about
Sure. So when you are now the breadwinner, you may have grown up thinking, "Hey, I'm going to be married. I may be a housewife, all those things." But you find yourself, I make more in the relationship. It
Mhm.
may make sense for my husband to stay at home from an economic standpoint. How can you still keep the relationship going? How can you make sure you're still healthy, that you don't have a trauma response or anything like that?
Yes. So having a clear understanding of what your circumstances are relative to your expectations. A lot of times people may kind of get caught up in the circumstances where things just kind of happen and you end up maybe working and your spouse does not work or, because that's just what works for your relationship. And then there's a level of resentment that might build as a result of that. Um, but that resentment may come because there's maybe a lack of clarity around what the expectations were in the beginning. And so I would invite people, or, I encourage people to reflect on what your expectations are at the outset and have a clear understanding of what your expectations of, your future, your marriage, your life in general, what those expectations are, and have good conversations, like deep, real, honest conversations with your partner about what those expectations are so that you know that you're on the same page. Or if you're not completely on the same page, you can get on a same page around what those expectations are and what you both expect out of the relationship from a financial place and just in general. Um, because yeah, we don't want the resentment to build as a result of unmet needs or unmet expectations.
Speak on the aspect you brought this up. Relationships will change. Like
Mhm.
we had mentioned, the breadwinner will change. Uh, Somebody's desires and passions of life change. How do you advise clients to flow with the dynamics of a natural relationship?
Mhm. We get caught up sometimes in thinking that there's and I don't know, maybe we can blame Disney and the fairy tales about, the happily ever after and everything's perfect.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
I think oftentimes when we think about relationships, marriages, and things like that, we think it should always be great.
Yeah.
Um, and things are always going to stay the same.
Mhm.
But marriages and relationships are dynamic. People are constantly growing, learning, changing, developing, doing all of those things. I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago, 5 years ago,
Mhm.
8 years ago, and neither is my husband. And the way that we interact with one another is not the same that it was 2, 5, 8 years ago. And so, because I'm a different person, because he's a different person, we've got to be flexible in being able to communicate those changes, communicate about what we value, what connects us, and all of that, so that the relationship itself can change and adapt and grow just like we are as people. And so that requires work. It requires self-awareness. It requires the ability to be not only be aware of what's going on for you, but to be able to articulate that to your partner in a way that, I don't want to say doesn't cause conflict, but in a way that um, is acceptable for both parties, so that the conflict that does arise, I think that's another misconception about relationships, is that there should never be conflict. So that the conflict that does arise, you can navigate it in a way that's beneficial, to the relationship and to both people involved in the relationship.
So let's pretend like there's a young couple and they both decided we want to start off our relationship or our marriage, our partnership on a healthy financial footing. How do you begin those conversations about money? What do you recommend folks bring up, disclose, share? Like, what does that look like from a therapist's perspective?
Mm. First, there's going to have to be a conversation about the conversation. So, what does it feel like to talk about money for you? As an individual, do some self-reflecting. When I think about having a conversation about money, what comes up for me? Am I like nervous? Am I scared? Am I like, hey, let's do it. Let's talk about it. I want to go through everything. Like, what is that? What's going on for you? And then your partner can do the same. And then you can have a conversation about that first. Like, talking about money makes me really nervous, or talking about money makes me want to run and hide. I don't want to do it at all. Um, or talking about money makes me feel really happy. I want to do it all the time. So once you're able to have a conversation about what the conversation brings up in you, then you have kind of this solid foundation of, okay, I know where my partner's coming from. I know what comes up for them when we talk about money. And so I know that we may have to, like, taper the conversation, or like structure the conversation in a way that gives them time to take a break. Or we may have to set some things in motion that ensure that the client, or that ensures that my partner, has the time to, balance their emotions and then come back to the conversation. So that would be the first step. And then um, maybe reflecting on, as a unit, as a couple, how do you navigate tough conversations? Because financial conversations can be very tough. They can be very emotional. They can be emotionally charged. And so conflict resolution, establishing a baseline level of conflict resolution, and communication patterns that promote clear and direct communication, is going to be the second step. Then the third step is having those conversations. What is it that, what are your financial goals, as an individual and as a unit? What what is keeping you from those goals right now? What are you doing, or what have you done to meet goals in the past? What's the life that you want to live, and how is that going to be attained? And then, talking through the nitty-gritty of the numbers.
It's interesting. The nitty gritty of the numbers is the last step. It's a lot
Yep.
of pre work that
Mm-hmm.
sounds like needs to happen. Uh,
Yes.
what if somebody listening and says that is a lot? It
Mm-hmm.
takes me to a vulnerable, low mindset.
Yeah.
Um, like, how do you deal with that? This young couple wants to. Is it like by default I may need help with this because it's two people coming together? Like, what is your thought process on somebody thinks that that's a lot of steps?
It is. I mean, it is a lot of steps. I think my default is to validate and normalize that. We're not taught how to talk about money, just
Mhm.
like we're not taught a whole lot, like, about money. A lot of us aren't taught a lot about money.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's tough, and it's also possible. It's
Mhm.
also doable. It's also, it can also mirror, and this is another piece of the work that I find really beautiful, is that having conversations about money and exploring the relationship to money can mirror different parts of other relations, or like other parts of a relationship. So the way that a couple can communicate about money is going to be indicative of how they can communicate about other, challenging things in their relationship. And so if a couple is able to do those foundational first two steps and get to a place where they can communicate solidly, clearly, and effectively, then that's not just going to be beneficial for their conversations about finances. It's going to be beneficial for their conversations as a whole. So the work is possible. It's going to be hard, but it's possible.
I always say if a couples has consistent financial goals and they're working together, even if I don't agree with the goal, they usually kind of stay together. It's amazing what happens when people can be aligned. During our pre-call, we talked about, finding a partner that's economically compatible with you. And one thing that you brought up during that call is like, no, it's more about finding somebody who matches your morals and values. Kind of speak on that angle, like why is economics less valuable, maybe so, than those morals and values, things you should be looking for in a successful relationship?
Yeah. And I mean, every relationship is different. Every person has different needs, and is looking for something different, like different things in a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that for relationships to relationships that last are built on those shared values, those shared beliefs, the shared kind of direction in life. Because that's the thing that you can fall back on when everything else, when life gets crazy, when the winds start blowing and everything gets crazy. When two people are on the same page as far as values and beliefs go, then things usually go pretty well. And also, I think that that may be more important than, and it's maybe more of like my personal idea, because again, everybody is different.
Mm-hmm.
That may be more important than financial match, like making the same amount of money, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the financial goals are the same and if the values are the same, then the the boat's going in the right direction, and the direction itself or the destination for the boat doesn't have much to do with each, if one person makes $10,000 more than the other person or more than that. And it also kind of brings to mind this quote from A Different World, where um Whitley, yeah, Whitley is her name, right? Yes. She said something to the effect of, or no, I think Dwayne asked her what kind of man you're attracted to, or are you attracted to a rich man? And she said, I'm attracted to men who are enterprising, ambitious, and dedicated, or something like that. And then I think Dwayne said something else, and she said, well, it's not about, those men are often rich. So it's less about like the actual money that's coming in and
Mm-hmm.
more about the values that are driving the income, if that makes sense. And I kind of butchered that whole scene. I'm gonna have to go find it on YouTube or something and watch it. But yeah.
I remember the scene. It's a great scene. I think it says a lot that, yes, where you start does matter, but if you have those morals and values, you can get there. What are the dangers of somebody who says, okay, the boat's going in the right direction, but I want the boat that goes there the fastest? What do you see that happening in your client's life? What are the dangers of trying to find the fastest boat and neglecting those morals?
Mm. Well, I mean, people value different things for different reasons, right? So trying to get to that destination may be because, I want to get to a place where I feel financially taken care of, or financially safe, financially secure, because I haven't had that level of security before. And I need to feel safe and secure. And so what's most important to me may be that my partner makes enough money for me to feel safe and secure. So to each their own, if that's your value and that's what's most important to you, then that's what's most important to you.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, I don't know if
Understood.
I have much else to add to that.
you I love listening to origin stories, especially of business owners, successful business folks. And one thing that's consistent is usually their parents had them working within the business, so they gained some type of enterprising experience as a young adult, so it made them more mature as they become older. How would you define family businesses, and how important is the family business as far as building wealth in general?
Yes. So family businesses are defined as any business or enterprise on which more than two or more management team members are a part of a family, or owners are a part of a family. or related to each other. And then your second question is, what was your second question?
Why is it so important as far as wealth building that family business be considered an important thing for you to work on?
Yes. Well, because, when there's ownership of an entity, ownership of a business, and there are multiple people in a family working toward that or owning that, then the next step is either to sell the business and to take the money that comes from that and do whatever they will with it, or to pass the business down. And a lot of people want to pass that business down because it's part of their legacy, or because their family business has been built on foundational principles that are really important to not only themselves, like the owner as an individual, but they're more like family morals, family values. And they want to see that, again, as a legacy kind of continued on. And so the wealth piece comes in, or the generational wealth piece comes in the passing down of those things. Because, and also where kind of my work comes in the family governance side of things, is when it comes to passing down a family business, it's not just about passing down, the management and you're going to be CEO or you're going to be the owner of it or whatever. It's about, this is the identity of the company. This is what the company has been founded on, and I want those values to be passed down too. And so in family businesses, it is really important to, have structures in place to pass down the financial pieces or like the management pieces. But a lot of the work that I do is helping families to establish what those values are and how are they pillars of the business, and how can we have a conversation or really kind of ingrain those values and the pillars into the rising generation, so that those things live on in the life of the business.
So I'm from the South, and college football is a big thing. And a
Mhm.
lot of times parents will dress their kids in the college uniform and really
Mhm.
encourage that kid to go to that university, almost rearing them, right or wrong. What have you seen parents do to encourage their kids? They can't guarantee it, just like they can't guarantee their kids going to a certain college. But how do you encourage a child to take some type of interest in the business? What are those behaviors? What can you do to give yourself the best opportunity to pass down your business to the next generation?
Yeah. So first, I think, what most often happens that can be detrimental to the transfer of the business is when a parent, or, yeah, when a parent um, just makes the assumption that the child is going to go into the business, or they force the child into the business. Let's say, the kid turns 18 and they're like, okay, here you go, you're going into the business, you're going to get your job at the entry level of the business and work your way up, and that's just what it is because you are my child and that's what you're going to do, without any input or conversation around what the child wants, what their goals are, what they're passionate about, or anything like that. So, to your question, what parents can do is to integrate the business, and the values of the business into their child's life kind of throughout it. Not necessarily like, well, I don't know, but like they can introduce, or, kind of at a developmentally appropriate level, introduce the business to the child, um, in whatever way is developmentally appropriate. Like, hey, maybe as a teenager, if you'd like, you can come and help in this area of the business, or bringing kids to family meetings, or, stuff like that. That can be really helpful in getting the kid introduced to the business. But the most important thing, or yeah, one of the most important pieces is going to be being flexible and really developing a relationship with the child, so that the child knows that they have the ability to do what they want. So it's not that the parent is forcing them into the business, but rather absorbing maybe them into the business, because you don't want the child to feel like they have to do something, And you also want the child to have a level of flexibility and individual, like individuality to do whatever they want, be it in the business or not in the business. There's a lot of writings and things like that about family enterprises and how parents can, integrate or kind of foster that relationship with their kids to get them involved in the business, to keep the family business going. And a lot of what's being said is how parents can not force the kid into the business in a specific role, but to be sensitive to or to, understand where the kid is coming from and see if the kid's passion aligns with maybe some of those values that exist in the company already, so that maybe that kid, instead of coming in as, CEO of X company that makes washing machines, I don't know, maybe the kid's passion is in art. And so maybe they can be, in charge of advertising or management in graphic design or things like that. So not forcing or pigeonholing a kid can be a great way to keep them involved and to allow them to maintain connection to the family business, but also maintaining that level of individuality.
I like that. Now, as the interviewer, I'm gonna take a lot of interviewer privilege right now. So
Okay.
I I'm gonna tell you what I advise, and I would love to get a professional feedback on when families have business. So I always advise your child should know what you do in the sense of be able to execute the task by the time that they're 18. And the whole time you tell them you have a choice what to do in the future. But at a minimum, you need to be able to do this job at a functional level, just in case you can always have something to fall back on. I believe that eventually the child may find something they're interested in, or over 20 years, they may boomerang back knowing that I have this home base to come back with. What do you think about requiring the child to at least be competent in the work that you do?
Mm. Um, it can be beneficial, like it can be helpful. Um, it's about how you go about it, I think. If the child is expressing a desire to do something else or expressing kind of an aversion to the business, it might not work out very well for the parent to say, well, no, I don't care, you're going to do this, because nobody wants to be forced to do anything. And also children, they can be inherently defiant sometimes. So again, kind of making it less of an obligation and more of a, maybe like, oh, look how fun this is. This is what I do for a living. This might be something that you can do when you grow up too. Let's talk about, what that looks like. And this is this is how you do this. This is how you do that. And as the kid grows up, they learn more and more and they may develop their own, interest in it
Mhm.
and understanding of the business. But it can also be like, yeah, you have this safety net, like you said, but you also have the freedom to do what it is that you'd like to do, as you kind of go spread your wings in the world.
Now, would it be too extreme to almost set it up as, growing up in my household, we had to make up our bed?
Mm,
Some might say we were forced to.
mm,
Why is that different than, hey, you have to work in this business? You can go off just as if you had a part-time job to other interests, play football, sing, music, dance. But in this household, we do this. What are the dangers of that? It may turn them off of the business. That's fine. But what I see a lot is a lot of kids leave the household without that industrious skill to make money for themselves.
mhm. Yeah, and so you're saying that, well, I hear two things.
Mhm.
First, what's the difference between, this is just kind of the norm within our family. And I think what's the difference between that and forcing a kid to be in the family business? And I think the difference is the way that you approach it. Uh,
Mm,
this is a norm within our family. This is what we do as a family is more, it's gentler than
mm.
this is what you are going to do when you get older. So
Ah,
you need to learn this thing. So I think that's the slight difference.
mhm.
Then there was another piece that just left my mind.
The second piece is I see a lot of times folks just send their kids off to college, and depending on the college, to be able to teach them to make a living for themselves.
Mhm.
And I think that is a big missed opportunity, especially in our community. And it could be a portion of parenting to make sure your child can earn a living for themselves.
Yes. And I think, that kind of goes back into overall kind of a familial culture around money and enterprising and what that looks like. Because I encourage families to have money meetings with their kids at a developmentally appropriate, level, but to talk about money, to talk about finances, not to, to talk about bills and how to pay them and all of that, not necessarily disclosing like, oh, this is exact, you're not going to tell a 5-year-old, we've got this much debt and this is what the mortgage is, things like that. But having again, developmentally appropriate conversations around what money is, how this family uses money, what our values are, what our purpose is related to money and what our relationship to money is. Creating that culture within the family is helpful throughout the course of the child's life so that the parents can teach, this is how to start a business, or this is how we started our business. This is how you balance the checkbook. I don't know if people balance checkbooks anymore, but like this is how you keep your income and expenses in check. Like teaching that basic financial literacy as something that is a part of like dinner conversation or weekly family meetings, and things like that, so that it isn't dependent upon where the kid goes to school or some external circumstance to teach them what that looks like.
I like it. I like it. One thing that you brought up in our pre-call, the concept of a family constitution.
Mhm.
Can you, if you don't mind, if you could define what a family constitution is and how it's used in family businesses?
Yes. So family constitutions are kind of exactly what I was just talking about, having an idea of what, or it's a document that outlines what a family's goals are around money, what their values around money are, the mission that the family has related to money and how they use it. And that's all outlined in this document that can read like our constitution, we the people, we the family of blah blah blah, value money in this way. We see money as a tool to be used to do X, Y, and Z. We see money as an opportunity to help other people, like things like that.
Mhm.
And it can be used in family governance or with family businesses as kind of that driving document or something to refer back to, just like in our government's constitution. It's something to refer back to keep us on track, to keep things, when we're making decisions, when we are making rules, or engaging in expansion or doing things that just kind of come with the life of a business. It's a guiding document that helps keep the values and the morals of the company, the foundation, at the forefront, so we don't kind of get off track.
With the folks that you work with concerning family business, what is some advice you would give to a family business? Like, what is something that keeps coming up and up again? Please take care of this. Please address this because it will solve a lot of headache.
Address your relationships. We people in family businesses often neglect to not even neglect, I don't want to use that word. There's a blurred line between the relationship as a family member and the relationship as a business partner, co-owner, subordinate, or whatever.
Mhm.
um and it's a blurred line, but it's also a line that often gets crossed or maybe even weaponized. Um, because if I don't like my cousin, but my cousin is my manager, and I don't like her because she made potato salad and put raisins in it or something at the last family reunion, and so I don't like her on a personal family level. but I'm going to do something in the business that's going to, keep her from advancing or do something, or I'm going to run to my grandfather who's her boss and tell him something about her. Like those roles get intertwined. And so the advice that I would give is keep it at the forefront to like make it a priority to handle those family things. And a way that family businesses, especially larger family businesses, can do that is through developing family advisory councils or family councils where family members can get together and talk about those things, the not business side of things, but the family side of things, having meetings around, okay, so cousin so and so, why did you do that? That's not okay. And, how can we have a conversation around this so that it doesn't seep into the business piece? Because once those not great relationship dynamics seep into the business, then that's affecting the bottom line and the success of the business. And that affects way more than just, the people who are in the family who aren't getting along. And it's an easy fix. I mean, there's work to be done, but it's an easy fix to have a family council where these kinds of things can be ironed out, or to integrate a family dynamics specialist, or kind of bring on an expert to do or facilitate these types of meetings to, again, kind of comb out and iron out these relational issues so that they don't impact the business.
It makes sense. So this is a show, practice prosperity. So how we like to advise people how people grow their practice. So how have you found ways to grow your practice? How are you gaining clients? How are you getting the word out that, hey, I'm open for business?
Meeting people, networking, which is honestly my worst nightmare. I'm in the mental health space as a mental health clinician. Um, we often don't do a whole lot as far as like networking or connecting with other professionals. I mean, we should, and I think, there are a lot of clinicians who do. And it's very important to network with other clinicians to get referrals and things like that. But what I'm learning is just how important that is to be able to connect with other people, especially as I'm expanding into kind of I'm covering two, or I exist at the intersection of two professions. So I'm learning a lot from the financial professionals that I meet, how important networking is and how beneficial it can be. So networking, getting exposure, meeting and talking with people, sharing my knowledge, speaking in front of people. I think that's my favorite part, or like my favorite way to network is like put me on a stage in front of a bunch of people and let me talk about some things that I'm passionate about, and then let those people come to me. That's my favorite part. As an introvert, I that's just the least draining way to network with a bunch of people. But yeah, those are some ways that I've been kind of getting myself out there and exposing my business and the services that I provide.
That's very good. Now, how do you explain what you do to folks? We've heard of a therapist.
Yeah.
Some have heard of a financial planner, but a financial therapist, like that is something I would say maybe cropped up 15 years ago. So it's relatively new in the world of profession. So, how do you tell people what you do and say this is something you may need?
It's I always get, when I share with people, oh, I'm a financial therapist, they're always like, what? I mean, I know what those words mean, but like, what does that mean? What do you do? And so it's a conversation starter, I guess. It evokes a lot of curiosity. But the way that I tell people what I do is I just say that I work at the intersection of money and emotions, and I help people to have conversations about their feelings about money. And I also help financial professionals to help their clients. Um, at the intersection of money and emotions, because as we all know, our relationship to money is an inherently emotional one. And a lot of times those emotions get in the way of us doing what we want to do with our money. And I help people get unblocked with that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of times as a financial professional, I'm on a call with a couple and I'm like, I'm not knowledgeable enough to help y'all with this situation. This is not 1 + 1 = 2. This is upbringing, how I feel, priorities, and they definitely conflict. As a practice owner, we don't have the benefit of a 401k, a nice company retirement plan. So, how do you think about preparing for a time in which you are no longer working financially?
I'm navigating that. I'm trying to figure it out. um, in building out my own kind of retirement plan with the savings, but also using and kind of leveraging my skills and resources to create streams of income that can outlive me as a worker, if that makes sense. That's kind of another piece, like building something with my practice or building something with the work that I do that can also serve as a retirement income generator. Um, that's another piece.
Makes sense. So, leveraging your brand, what you know that you can serve, one to many versus one to one.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. So, any advice you would give somebody? Hey, I like what she was saying. I think I want to have this as a profession. Any advice to somebody wanting to go into practice for themselves?
Into just overall practice?
Hmm.
Hmm. Do your research. Make sure it's the right choice for you.
Yeah.
It's not the right choice for everybody. Um, do your research, set a plan, get some mentors with an S, get some mentors, um, and don't count yourself out. I was reading a book by Stacy Spikes, I believe, and he said that he had a conversation with someone as he was kind of on his entrepreneurship journey, and that person shared with him, I think it's a Japanese proverb, and I don't know it in Japanese. I don't know Japanese, but the effect of it is when things are good, chop wood and carry water. When things aren't going good, chop wood and carry water. So no matter, as things ebb and flow, stay on top of what you're doing and make sure that, your work ethic or the work that you do and put into the world doesn't wane when things are going good or when they're not going good.
As you're chopping wood and carrying water, what is next for you? Where do you see your firm in the next 5, 10 years? What are you working on?
Yes, well, I'm working on a few things. I am seeing clients, of course, and I hope to continue seeing clients. But I also am looking to expand, and ideally, my goal in the next 5+ years, maybe even sooner, is to build out my consultation to serve and to be able to partner with those in family offices and advisors and firms, and to do some really great work with some families, not only in the U.S. but across the world, who are in business.
So, if I'm a family or I have a family business that are having financial struggles, relationship wise, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can check out my website, harrispierreconsulting.com. There's information there. You can contact me there. You can also, if you're not in a family business and you just want some family therapy, you can check out my website, shadesofyoucounseling.com. That is my private practice, my therapy practice. And then also, if you're just curious about the intersection of feelings and money, and want to hear some stories, you can check out my podcast, Shades of Wealth Podcast, on all podcast platforms. And you can check out that website as well, www.shadesofwealthpod.com.
Love it. I love it. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Shay. I think what you shared, I think relationship is money where the rubber meets the road. If you clear that up, you can clear a lot of things up. So I love what you do, and I hope you continue practicing. Thank you for joining me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
If you've been inspired to leverage your practice to create financial freedom, please schedule a consultation with Deasil Wealth Management. The legacy you dreamed of is a 15-minute phone call away from becoming a reality.
The more I know, the more money I can make.